Good old tried and true and trusty cherry Dr. Pepper, because I feel we're going to need it today. It's Romania Black. We are on episode 12 of Steins Gate, and I took my dogs outside and let them go hang out for a bit outside because we need to talk about this episode. I feel like shit's going down this week, and I'm not ready for that because last week was pretty terrifying. Ocarine got a threatening text message saying you know too much, along with a bloody doll's head that I think is targeting Kurisu, but could be targeting Mayuri, could be targeting Morika, could be targeting anybody, could be targeting Nai. We don't know. It's very concerning. And by the end of the episode, I just watched the dub episode for episode 11 here just a second ago, and Okarine's a little bit worried, as he should be. The problem is, can we go back now? I don't think we can. So let's talk real quick about the comments and then about the English dub of the episode, and then we're going to dive into episode 12. I have held off this episode for a little bit because I was like, I don't know. I'm worried about it. I'm very worried. There was a correction. Okay, so Devilesque and Father Doug in the Discord over on Patreon, I had several comments that were talking about the IBN 5100, and people have been very kind and talking about the visual novel differences and things like that. And so to set the record straight, to go back and talk about episodes 9 and 10 and set the record straight with all that discussion from the intros of those episodes, Devilesque said, an episode 9 correction, people keep telling me that they didn't hack the database with the IBN 5100, they do in the anime, but it may be an error versus the light novel. Devilesque said they learn about the phrase the human is dead mismatch in the emails from Daru hacking in episode 3, and that more details are in the Jellyman's report. They don't know there's actual gel people until they read Jellyman's report after opening the database using the IBN 5100. Forgot they called him Jellyman. Also, Jellyman, we had that picture of the red jello. This does not bode well. But then Father Doug kind of followed up with that, and I really liked how Father Doug explained it, so let's hear Father Doug out. Father Doug says, in the anime, episode 3, where we first get info which is not written in code, Daru gets minor permissions the first time around when they get access to the servers. Daru also notices the database in code in episode 4 and later in episode 5. When Kurisu is there after they've carried the IBN 5100, they needed parts to fix it, which Ocarine gets, and they end up doing an all-nighter, and we're shown that Daru is working with the parts. Later, we're shown that they got full permissions around 14 minutes and 37 seconds in episode 5. This is the part that the anime can make confusing. We don't actually see them using the IBN to get access. We were just shown the IBN loading in the background around 14 minutes and 44 seconds in episode 5, getting him access to the login. That's where I've been confused, because I saw the IBN light up, and if you all go back to that discussion, I was even like, but how did the IBN help them crack the code? And how did they use that? And how is it? Well, now we know why. Now it makes sense, right? Because they hadn't actually used it. Towards the end of episode 3, Daru got into CERN hacking into an employee account to get the ID and password, and he even mentioned that there are limits that he can get without being an admin. That was the first and only time we saw the human is dead mismatch. Later on, Daru would do it again and got his hands on the admin account and was able to discover the whole Jellyman's report and CERN's secret documents, which we see in episode 5 when they get access, but it comes off in the anime as them having used the IBN to read it. That's what it was. So now we've established, to go back from episode 5 moving forward, that they didn't actually need the IBN. John Teeter wanted the IBN machine because he believed that if you used that back in the day, you could have hacked into CERN and possibly changed the course of the future. That's where all that's coming in at. But Daru had access to the admin account around episode 5, and that's where they started learning about all of this, which makes me very scared because, since episode 5, did Daru just not get out of that server? Did he stay logged into that VPN and CERN figured it out and now they've been eavesdropping on all of them? That's problematic. I don't like that. But thank you, Father Doug, for explaining that. Now it all makes sense. And thank you, Devilesque, for also explaining that. And thank you all of those who are trying to help out a girl as well. So Cassandra in episode 10 says, it's so mean of that young tomboy to make that twink ride a bike. Talking about Amane and making Ocarine ride the bike. He should be doing nerd stuff in his lab. Those legs aren't made for exercise. I don't know. He ran pretty damn good on the way back after thinking Mayuri was in trouble last episode, so I don't know about that. And then S Anime for episode 10 says the moment that Kurisu is referring to when she says, I'm glad you thought of me as a dear companion, refers to the moment in episode 9 where she's crying after the phone call and sits beside him and he refers to her as an important ally, which can also be translated as a precious companion or dear friend. So I guess changing world lines to the no moe culture world line didn't change the fact that this moment happened between the two of them, which is kind of sweet to know. That makes me wonder, because so far, I mean, we can't say this completely because whenever they were debating on using the lottery ticket and Ocarine changed world lines that first time, there were parts of their previous discussion that, like we talked about in the last episode, we're going to talk about it with the dub here in a second, but there were parts of that conversation that didn't save. And so Ocarine was like, do you remember this conversation? And Kurisu was saying no. But it seems like it appears that when we change world lines, only the conversations that were pertinent to that reason we changed world lines are what's forgotten. But some of the staple core memories do remain, which is the same with Mayuri and him and Daru and their knowledge of their friendship and all of that. So that is good to know. Also, I wondered if because Kurisu is kind of intrinsically tied to all this and she's like the hourglass in the ED, if maybe her memories don't alter like other people's do. We'll see. And then finally for comments, Alexandra Q for episode 10 says, as kind as Okabe's actions are, and they are, he is trying to help his friends. I think this episode also shows that they are at least a little bit selfish. He didn't only go back in time to help Suzuha, even though I firmly believe that was part of it, but it was also because his friend was leaving and he didn't want that. When that smoke bomb went off, I kept waiting for the fire alarm to go off and ruin the food, but that didn't end up happening, which was nice. I guess they could still keep the food intact. So yeah, no, he's basically been doing a lot of this for his own reasons. But yeah, that might all come back to bite him. I don't know. So anyway, the dub episode 11 was pretty straightforward. They do start out with Ocarine saying to Amane, your mission, should you choose to accept it, which I was like, all right, reference, let's go. And then I will say Ocarine's voice actor, J. Michael Tatum in the dub, he's so good. So good in this episode. Episode 11, he was great. He said, I can't believe he actually hit me. And there was like such sincerity in the way Ocarine's character said that. I felt really bad for him in that moment, even though I already knew that episode moment was happening. The way that they explain things in the dub, there are parts of it that kind of make it have a little bit more sense. And there's parts of it that I'm like, oh, you all took some liberties in the translation of this part. Again, so very kind of similar to episode 2. Kurisu explains what they're doing as consciousness hopping rather than time travel, which I'm like, that's kind of what Ocarine's been doing. And then they did bring up this point of Akibara having the equipment they needed, and I wondered if that was from the butterfly effect, where since there's not the moe culture there, they have more stores that have the things they need to do the time hopping business, and I was like, that might be interesting. Kurisu says the phone rave can't compress all the data without add-ons, and then there's the nothing silence. They basically describe it as grafting our current mind onto a form of our former self. Ocarine's basically doing everything that's being proposed in this episode without realizing it, so that's a fun time. And then Mayuri's voice actress, when they were talking about what's been going on and what would happen, like if you go back and take your memories into the past, Mayuri's like, if that happened, I would cry. And he's like, oh, for me? And she's like, no, for me. If she knew, she would cry. And I'm like, girl, if you find out what's been going on and how many world lines this man is hopped between, and he probably can't count on two hands at this point, then you might be a little bit worried and concerned about the Ocarine that you know. And is that going to catch up to him? I guess we'll find out. But Amane, we find out in the dub the boss told her to keep the sports bra on and the shorts on as a form of punishment, not something that he enjoyed. So I thought that that was an interesting change for context. But then Ocarine, he says he compares her to a Street Fighter character. And in the dub, she's like, oh, well, this get up wouldn't work for actual fighting. So again, Girl's a Soldier, when, where, what? Her and Moeka are so suspicious that I'm like, Moeka and Amane are so suspicious. 003 and 008 are so suspicious. I don't know. I do like that whenever J. Michael Tatum voices Ocarine and he gets cocky, he does sound like more of a jerk. Like when he's trying to pry if Kurisu is a spy, you can tell he's aggravated and he thinks he's being betrayed, so it makes him sound a little bit more cocky. But as soon as Kurisu's like, will you listen to me? He's like, tell me more, I'll be good. I was like, you are whipped, sir. Whipped. So whipped on that playground listening to her, which is the thing. He wants to help her, but it's like, you've made all these promises, but now you're realizing it's such a bad idea. How can you change their minds without... I'm like, just tell them everything that's going on, but why he won't do it, you know, he's a mad scientist. That's why. Some interesting points to note is that Kurisu talks about her dad. In the dub, she says he was a physicist. Emphasis on the was, which was not directly noted with the Japanese sub. She also talks about pointing out his mistakes. There are two parts of this that the English dub takes, I feel, a little bit of liberties with, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. Like when one, she's talking about how, you know, her dad was a physicist and they used to like exchange emails, and she started to shame him by pointing out mistakes with his theories and proving him wrong. She says in the episode that she was emasculating him because he wasn't right. And I was like, ooh, that's a weird... It was a weird choice of translation because I don't think the original text mentions emasculation. And also, like, is it manly to be told you're right about everything? That feels a little... It was giving me like toxic masculinity vibes. I was like, I don't like that. And then the other thing that I was like, oh, was she's like, and the last thing he told me was, I'm your dad, you little bitch. I was like, what? Like that was a change in the text. I don't think in Japan, in the Japanese sub, her dad called her a bitch, but I was like, maybe the intent with feeling and emotion was there, but I was like, that made me like, I was mid-drink and was like, what? So anyway, Ocarine tries to make her feel better, and this dub translation where he's like, pick the day and I'll free up my schedule. I'm like, you have no schedule, sir. I was like, ridiculous. And then she said, sometimes you're a good guy. I'm like, uh-huh. And then whenever Ocarine is trying to like, when they have the pudding cup conversation, that whole conversation in the dub was just a hilarious back and forth. But I think my favorite line was, he's like, you've got one too many aliases. I'm like, you've given her all the aliases, sir. That was your doing. But anyway, at the very end, whenever he gets the text message that says, you know too much, J. Michael Tatum says, oh my God. And that, oh my God, like it went to my core. I felt that. I was like, J. Michael Tatum does such a good job with this series. It's so good. It's so good. So I did look, and the site I've been watching the dub on does have the dub for episode 12. They've got some clips for episode 13, and I was like, I don't know. So I may be reaching out to some people to find alternates for the dub. But anyway, we'll see. You know, this is the halfway point of the series at this point. With episode 12, we're at the halfway point, and I'm nervous. I don't like where this is headed. So, sure. What could go wrong? Let's find out, shall we? I'm nervous. I was going to get cherry Dr. Pepper, and I'm like, that's too chaotic for this week. Too chaotic. We need something tried and true to give us some stability amidst all of my concerns. Nope, this feels like one of those series where the midway point episode is going to be terrifying. So, anyway, we're not going to waste any more time. We're just going to rip off the Band-Aid and it'll be fine. Everything's great. So, thanks for watching with me. And I'm so excited for you to see my discussion reaction to this episode. But we are going to start episode 12 of Steins Gate here in 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and ask me if I'm surprised. Oh my God. The only thing I will say is if this episode's goal was to make you feel a sense of dread and despair knowing that something bad was going to happen to Mayuri, well, then its mission was accomplished in abundance. But if your goal was to make Mayuri getting shot a surprise, there was no surprise to me that Mayuri got shot. The moment that she was singled out, I was like, they're going to say they don't need her anymore and they're going to shoot her. And I was like, because this episode, it was just like red flag after red flag after red flag after red flag after foreshadowing after foreshadowing. I was like, every trope that you could name of Mayuri, something bad's going to happen to her, happened in this episode. And who called it with Moika? I love how at the very beginning, I thought that Moika was the red herring and that Amane was the spy for CERN, when in fact it's turned out to be flipped, where Moika is the spy. After last episode, I was like, Moika is definitely the CERN spy, and Amane, the one thing is I don't know what Amane's deal is with the organization that she's with. It would be interesting. It would be an interesting twist if Moika was with CERN, because that's she said she was with CERN. And if Amane was with the organization, but the organization turns out to be something that is helpful rather than what Ocarine says is like going to be the downfall of everything. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know. But it makes sense for Moika to be the CERN spy because she's been taking photos since the very beginning, photos of everything, photos of Ocarine, photos of the people involved, photos of everything. She's been Moika played the smart game. She's been communicating very limited verbal, all mainly through text messages, which can be manipulated in terms of tone. So if you don't have a good poker face, text messaging, you don't have to worry about that. The whole femme fatale texting with all the flirty winks and stuff at the beginning. If you notice, as the series progressed, and it wasn't just because Ocarine changed world lines, as the series progressed, her texting stopped being all this oh, bestie, let me see the things, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, heart, heart, and more I want to see the computer. It stopped being the femme fatale flirting and started to just drop the pretense as the series went on, which was suspicious, if I could talk, which was suspicious, and we talked about how her texting tone did not match up. Red flag. So then her acting as the damsel in distress outside of Akihabara looking for the IBM 5100 was suspicious. And I think that it was either one of two things. She either wanted the IBM 5100 because it has a connection to John Teeter, and she was going to use it to get CERN to lure out John Teeter or Beryl Teeter, whoever at this point, and she needed that computer and wanted to get it from Ocarine. Or the entire her need to get the 5100 was just a means of her getting access into the lab to plant the device that CERN could spy on them. Because if you think about it, I don't think that CERN was spying up until the point Moika came to the lab. And she was messing around with things throughout that episode that Ocarine's like, what are you doing? She talked about FB. We still don't know what the fudge FB is. She says she's doing it for FB. Everything that she's doing, the motivation is FB. Facebook? I don't know. What is FB? But we don't know who that is or what that is. Ocarine kind of, I feel lied at the very beginning when they met, being like, oh, I get it. And she was like, oh, he's like, you're the new lab member. I don't know what FB is. So that's a mystery that we have to figure out. I feel like Amane, in not trusting Kurisu, I feel like part of that is that she thinks that she, one, thought that Kurisu was the one spying on them through CERN, which we find out is Moika. Two, I think she is still connected to the world lines transitioning. She's still connected to the future. She talked about prophecy in this, but where did she get that prophecy? Who told her the prophecy? Where did that come from? So we need to add that on here. Where did Amane, and I know the orange is hard to see, but it's festive and Halloween and I want to use it. So she talked about prophecies, which we'll go back through the episode. And where was that coming with? I think that let's be real. This was also foreshadowed, where in Kurisu's calculations, Ocarine, she had slated for them to use the time leap machine on August 13th to go back to August 11th. Well, now that Mayuri's been shot and killed, yeah, I think Okarine's going to use the time leap machine, because why not? At this point, no holds bars. There should be nothing holding them back, right? The question is, next week in episode 13, is he going to be able to use it in the moment? Is Amane going to come back and like help, take out these goons with the guns? I don't know. They've outnumbered them, so I don't know. And they have no weapons in the lab to fight back with, unless you talk about a vacuum cleaner. But would Ocarine use the time leap machine to go back and try to stop Mayuri from getting killed? That opens up a whole can of worms. Again, that's a death node that we're gonna have to change. That could change a lot of things. We need to point out in this episode what might change because of that. So we'll do that. But I wondered if Amane knew from the future that Kurisu ends up joining CERN. Whether she believes that Mayuri's dead, I have to do this, I have to comply, and CERN's like, you're smart, you helped design this, we want you as part of our team to perfect it. And I could see her joining CERN because she either feels obligated to and under pressure for her own life, or she has said, she's like, I'm about advancement and being a scientist. Kurisu might actually be the actual mad scientist, more so than Ocarine. And she's like, well, to advance the time leap machine, I'm going to join CERN and help them. We were going to sell it to an organization anyway, so now we're going to help perfect it. And Ocarine's going to be like ultimate betrayal, and we'll see what we get. But maybe that's what Amane meant, was that she was going to betray him and join CERN. I don't know, but I feel like they're going to have to use the time leap machine, or Mayuri's dead for the rest of the series. I don't like the possibility of that, but okay. So we're going to talk about ergospheres here in a hot second, but first, the Earth 70 million years ago. So out to the side here, we're going to have a little tiny micro conversation about this opening dream. This opening dream that takes place in Earth 70 million years ago. There's this kind of tie of like reincarnation with this, where the watches stopping and the hourglass stopping. Oh my God, we're going to talk about it, because I'm still not exactly sure how that happened. But the hourglass, it's stopped, and he's like, Mayuri, she's like, you were sent here by a time machine. And it's his consciousness. He's like, is that you, Mayuri? Mayushi has looked for Ocarine in many, many world lines, chasing him. So she talks about chasing. So Mayuri has chased Ocarine in timelines or world lines. Which, the idea of him going to different world lines and finding her, you could view it as her chasing after him in that sense. It's like, you could say that the Ocarine here is one of many Ocarines. And you could say that he is the original Ocarine. Which, honestly, yeah, it sounds crazy, but no matter how many Ocarines you have, they are still the Ocarine. Getting at the idea that every time he changes world lines, he doesn't duplicate himself. He's not cloning himself. It is the Ocarine changing world lines every time. It's still him. It's still the original one. And that kind of goes along with the idea of the time leap machine, where they're saying your body isn't changing. You're not duplicating. It's not osmosis. It's nothing like that. But your brain is just traveling to a different version of yourself. And then you could also say that the Mayushi here is one of many Mayushis. And you could also say that she's the original too. It's like all the different Mayuris in the OP, they're all the same one, just different versions, different world lines. And you see the crack. So I think Ocarine and Mayushi are going to die here. So she says in the dream that in this, at the very core, at the very beginning of time, she says that her and Ocarine are going to die in this. And you see the crack it not only looks like the hourglass has a crack, but it looks like it's been scratched up by sand. She says, we're going to die here. There's lots of cracks in it, but I believe that our wills will carry on to the Ocarina, Mayushi, and Akihabara 70 million years from now. So, it's okay. And then she disintegrates. So, let's talk about foreshadowing. Let's do our little foreshadow counter. Let's do the foreshadow counter. Down here in the corner. It's like the Krillin counter in Dragon Ball Z Abridged. It's like that, you know. Always fun, you know. So the first thing was the counting of her, like, spirit. Also, two in this one, because not only is she disintegrating, but it's like a dream that's foreshadowing a bad future. And Ocarina's like, what? She's like, you know, maybe our wills will carry on, will be reincarnated into the future. And then we have the dogma in ERGOSPHERE, and that's where we go. So it's basically about this idea that our will is going to be reborn. Right? That it's our will. I find it interesting that both Kurisu and Mayuri have had these dialogues. Kurisu is the voice of, like, the celestial sphere that was telling Ocarina in his one dream about, you know, the event horizon. And now we have Mayuri that's narrating this part here. Arguably, they're the two most important women in his life. Or arguably the two most important people. I mean, you can include Daru in that too, but I think, you know, I think he values Kurisu and Mayuri the most. So let's talk about this. Called Dogma in ERGOSPHERE is the title of this week's episode. Last year it was a different dogma, but I'm going to show you a picture up here because I think the picture is important. The picture is, this is at the ERGOSPHERE. It is shown the violet outline is the outer rim and the red inside is the inner. And then there's like temporal metrics that become negative and spatial metrics. It looks like a bird beak and also a vagina. So that's all I could think about looking at that picture. I'm like, well, it's either like a Japanese bird beak like in Grogu's basketball, or it's a vagina. So that's cool. Neato. Very end of Evangelion of it. Is right? Like the universe is feminine. So, anyway, in astrophysics, the ergosphere is a region located just outside a rotating black hole. Funny, those black holes, between its event horizon and a further external surface predicted by the metric that describes these objects. Its name was proposed by Remo Ruffini, what a great name, love the alliteration, and John Archibald Wheeler during the Les Hoches lectures in 1971, derived from the ancient Greek ergon, which means work. It received its name because it is theoretically possible to extract energy and mass from this region. The ergosphere touches the event horizon at the poles of a rotating black hole and extends to a greater radius at the equator. A black hole with a modest angular momentum has an ergosphere with a shape approximated by an oblate spheroid, aka what looks like a vagina, which faster spins produce a more pumpkin-shaped ergosphere. Pumpkin, pumpkin, we'll go with pumpkin. The equilateral maximal radius of an ergosphere is the Schwarzschild radius, the radius of a non-rotating black hole. The polar minimal radius is also the polar minimal radius of the event horizon, which can be as little as half the Schwarzschild radius for a maximally rotating black hole. So in the picture they give us, you can see that red disc in the middle is the singularity. It's the ring singularity, where the black hole it's the perimeter of the black hole. Then you have in the red, like the inner ergosphere. So the ergosphere is like the sphere of the black hole itself. Then you have the inner horizon, the event horizon. Then you have the outer horizon and the outer ergosphere that is like the pumpkin shape, is essentially what you have there. So I think it's interesting. We talked last week about event horizons, and this is when the event horizon meets the black hole. But there's a rotation to it, right? So as the black hole rotates, it twists space-time in the direction of the rotation at a speed that decreases with the distance from the event horizon. This process is known as lens thawing or frame dragging. Because of this dragging effect, an object within the ergosphere cannot appear stationary with respect to an outside observer at a great distance unless that object were to move at faster than the speed of light, an impossibility with respect to the local space-time. The speed necessary for such an object to appear stationary decreases at points further out from the event horizon until some distance the required speed is negligible. The set of all such points defines the ergosphere's surface called the ergosurface. The outer surface of the ergosphere is called the static surface or static limit. This is because world lines change from being time-like outside the static limit to being space-like inside it. It is the speed of light that arbitrarily defines the ergosphere's surface. Such a surface would appear as an oblate that is coincident with the event horizon at the pole of rotation, but a greater distance from the event horizon at the equator. The space is still dragged, but at a lesser rate on the outside of the surface. So they talk about the radial pull. So you have basically this black hole, if we're going to use like the black hole here, and then as the test particle approaches the ergosphere in retrograde, the direction is forced to change in the direction of motion. So let's say your black hole is rotating this way, right? And then let's say a particle like just happens to come in into the black hole. It gets sucked up into the black hole and begins to like swirl around it and become intertwined with the rotation, which we talked about earlier on when we had the whole quantum physics discussion. So the question is the black hole and gathering energy from it, and what do we use what is a metaphor for this entire thing with the ergosphere, right? Because it seems like once we started, it feels like this is ocarine, and this is the idea of time travel and where the series started at. And once Ocarine got into the black hole, he can't get out. Once he gets caught up into it, no matter what he does, he cannot escape from his fate. So it says, since the ergosphere is outside the event horizon, it is still possible for objects that enter the region with sufficient velocity to escape from the gravitational pull of the black hole. An object can gain energy by entering the black hole's rotation and then escape from it, taking some of the black hole's energy with it, making the maneuver similar to the exploitation of the Oberth effect around normal space objects. So, if Ocarine comes in hot and exploits the world line at maximum overdrive speed, sure, maybe he can get out of it. So that gives a little bit of hope. Maybe. a very strained, thin hope. But the way he was now, the way he was like, oh, I'm just going to get out of it. It's like, no, you knew too much. You're in too deep. Now, the question is, whose phone was Moika using to send? Well, hell, she could have been using her own phone, but she was just sending from a different email. Or did she have a second phone? That's a good question. But yeah, so we have all this going out. The size of the ergosphere and the distance between the ergosphere and the ergosurface and the event horizon is not necessarily proportional to the radius of the event horizon, but the black hole's gravity and angular momentum. So yeah, essentially though, it's all getting drug into this black, like this whole, like once you're drug into the mess, it's hard to leave the mess. And who are you dragging along with it? And what's going to be the effect of that? So that's a fun time. So Dogma in the ergosphere. Ocarine is not doing well. He is not doing well at all. And Mayuri comes up to get him saying she's almost done with everything. And she like grabs his hand. That's foreshadowing number 3. I just heard grabbing his hand, having this little sentimental moment. Nope, foreshadowing number 3. Then there is the countdown of the clock saying that it wasn't just the countdown of the clock saying it was August 13th. It was the zooming in on the clock saying August 13th at 1400 hours. So yep, we're going to tie that down. That was a foreshadowing moment. So then they go downstairs. I'm going to also put up here as we go, and then I'm not going to count the long pause on the roof as foreshadowing, but I could. but I could. So we'll just get past that. Anyway. So yeah, so this episode, the hourglass that stops moving. Why did it stop moving? So I want to put questions up here. Questions, overarching questions as we go through this episode. Overarching questions that we need answers to. Why did the hourglass and time stop? That was weird. Why did the hourglass stop working? That seems odd. Is there a reason for it? I don't know. So they're like, do you think you could hold this? Okay, so the hourglass at that point didn't stop yet. And so they're working on Mayuri's cosplay, which is super cute. And she's talking about making cosplay for Kurisu, who doesn't want to admit that she is a nerd. And she notices that Ocarina is still zoning out. And they're done too. And now everybody's done. And we have the time leap machine. So the time leap machine is actually a lot less cumbersome than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be this big clunky thing. Like, we've come a long way from the microwave that made Jill Nanas. Now this thing just looks like a bunch of headphones. And you just plug it in and go. Which makes it seem like it's going to be very easy to use. Which is concerning. Concerning, if you will. But yeah, so they've made these headphones. It looks like an evil organization's brainwashing machine. The moment they said that, I was like, oh man, if Amane heard you say that, she'd be questioning it. So my second question is, what is Amane's deal? Is Amane going to be somebody that rescues Ocarine? Is that going to be the case? Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Daru could get shot in the next episode too. Honestly, because it's really Ocarina and Kurisu that are the two masterminds. Daru's been putting stuff together, but I wouldn't put him on the same level as those two. So they could hurt Daru as well to have less collateral. And it's like... But yeah, they're like, it does look like a brainwashing machine. And it's like Microwave Chan now with headphones. It may not look like much, but theoretically this can transmit memories into the past. Now, the one next part of foreshadowing was when they said they had tapped into the Hadron Collider. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So they have been basically tapped into the Hadron Collider. My thing was they were going to announce to the world that they had put this, again, these are 19-year-olds planning this, by the way, so that makes sense. But they were going to announce that they created a time leap machine. When they announced that they were going to use the Hadron Collider, and everybody's like, how'd you hack into that? And Daru would have had to be like, yeah, we hacked into a government organization, totally legit and legal, not harming anyone guarantee. like what? So I was like, they did not... I don't know if they thought that out, because I was getting a little worried. I was like, oh yeah, cool that you're going to notify the public, but what about hacking into CERN? That's going to be like, isn't that going to look a little criminal? So she's like, okay, me on August 13th, which is what we're about to have next week, because it's August 13th now, and then the hippocampus, and then it collapses. They scan the 3.24. I wonder if that's related to pi, but that's 3.14. Anyway, terabytes, the nerve pulses encoded into electric signals. They use the Hadron Collider. And by using the Hadron Collider, we use the black hole with the data and compress it. So again, we're using the black hole to create the time leap machine. This all just sounds like it's going to lead to the worst things. And this says time leap is the same as a D-mail. We're just sending the data back to your former self. Totally fine. I don't know. The one thing that I was going to ask about this is how the former self, and I asked this last week, how the former self is getting the data. Because in the weirdest ways makes sense why Ocarine goes to a different world line the moment that the D-mail is sent, because the timeline has shifted and changed. But I don't know how because you sent the information from one electronic device to another electronic device using electronic waves and signals. So that makes sense. That checks out. And then sending the text to the pager, that checks out. But the concept of sending electromagnetic waves and stuff from a device to a human being that's not hooked up to any devices at all feels like it wouldn't theoretically work. So I don't know how they were going to go around that, but they were ready to test it out on people. We'll just send the data. We'll use a cell phone waves spread spectrum to copy the future memories to the brain in the past. I guess, are they assuming that you're going to pick up the phone? Are they using it through the phone? And then you press, your memory goes into the phone, and then they're assuming the person answers the phone and the waves will like come out through that. I don't know how I buy that, but I'm not a scientist or an astrophysicist. I don't know, but I don't know if that would theoretically sound like it works. But it's an anime, it's sci-fi. We'll just run with it. The furthest you can send data back, though, is 48 hours at a time. I'm glad there's a limitation. I'm glad there is some kind of limitation on all of this, because the idea of sending stuff back further and further terrifies me. So right now there's a 48 two-day time limit. So here's the question of how this all gets even more tangled. Because what Ocarine was planning to do was not use the time leap machine and not use the time leap machine at all and just let the organization have it. So the plan was, we're going to let the organization have it. And that's it. And that led to him not using it in the first place. Okay. If that changes and Ocarine somehow gets out of whatever just happened, which, y'all, I'm not going to wait a long time to watch episode 13. I got to know. But I'm going to at least wait till the comments come in for episodes 10 and 11 before I do that. So we'll just wait on that. But it's like, if he gets a hold of the time leap machine before he wasn't going to use it, well, and he had decided that on, August 13th, right? That they decided not to use it. And they said, we're going to give stuff away the next day. If he decides to go back and he decides after, so they were going to let the organization have it, and then CERN shows up and Mayuri is shot. Which, even when you know it's coming, even when you know that something bad's going to happen to Mayuri, that was terrifying, them just busting in. And it wasn't a joke. It was very serious. And I was like, ah. So anyway, so CERN gets Mayuri shot, and then we don't know what is happening in episode 13 after that. But let's say Ocarine gets out, and let's say he uses the time leap machine to pass on his memories that he has used to take it back to here, where they decided not to use it, right? Okay, so he gives his former self the memories of what all happened here. Okay. So what we have before that's happened is Mayuri and Ocarine on the roof. Mayuri with the cosplay. Okay. We'll add more to that here in a little bit. But let's say he uses the machine to go back. Let's say he takes it, 2 days back. So it'd even be before this. So 2 days ago was before Amane's party, which also would be before the convo with Mayuri. Would that have been back when they were doing the whole stuff with Ferris was 2 days ago? Could have been. I need to find that out, but how do I find that out? I need to go back to a few episodes ago. I'm going to pull this up on streaming and go back to that. It's just all the conversations with Mayuri where she said, I would write foreshadowing on here, but it's from last week's episode. But the whole thing, the convo with Mayuri about her being sad that they wouldn't have those conversations. They'd be deleted if he went back. But then again, Okarine's not going to care because the alternative is she's dead. So at this point, he's not going to care if some of those conversations don't happen because if he doesn't do that, she's going to die. So anyway, let me go here back to episode 10. We'll go back to episode 10 and see if we get in that, because that episode was a setup episode, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it's going to let me do it or not. I feel like that was on the 11th, but I want to check real quick and see if we got like a date and time when that was. Okay, when did he get that text? That text of "I'm watching you." Okay, the text of "I'm watching you" was sent on the 9th. Okay. And so this was, around the 9th and 10th. So it was October and August 9th. So it was after Amane's party, would have been around the 11th. Okay, that's fair enough. After Amane's party with them, when she was about to leave, that's when we got what's going on now. So if we went back, we would go back to here. So my issue is, if he uses up here, oh no, dropped the marker. If he uses the time leap machine to go back to around the time of Monet's party to tell himself that knowledge of everything that's going to happen here, where this is the problem. Two problems. Two. At least two. So the problem is, during this time here, he not only bonded with Kurisu, like, they legit had the most romantic moments they've had the entire series in this episode. If he goes back to inform about this, Okarine's going to remember, but Okarine also looks and sounds like a crazy person when he says stuff that nobody else has the context to, so it's going to amplify that, just like it's been doing this whole series. But on top of that, that all will be gone. The stuff with Mayuri will be gone. But Okarine realizing the seriousness of all this is going to be gone as well. He's going to be like, well, F it. Mayuri's died. F it. We're just going to go back and change everything. I'm not going to care about the consequences because the worst consequences already happened, and that's going to be Mayuri dying. Here's the second problem with all that. Not only is all that romantic stuff with Kurisu going to be thrown out the window if he does that, maybe he can develop it again. Who knows? It wasn't a lot of romantic stuff, but still, it was like some kind of foundation. And I'm like, she's going to forget all of that because you're going to rewrite things. But the second part is, when he gets back here, this whole part we've had the last several, days have been Okarine realizing, because of the text messages of, you know too much, somebody's watching you, you're in trouble. All of those texts have made Okarine realize that they don't need to move forward with the time leap experiment because it could be really, really dangerous. If Okarine sends himself a message and all that data back to the past, do you think that Okarine is like, hey, let's turn in the time machine. Let's not move forward. No, that's not what's going to happen. Instead, he's going to be like, full throttle. Let's use it. Let's go with this time leap machine. Let's use it. Let's change shit in the past. Let's go back even further. Let's keep using it. Let's just keep going. It's going to escalate. It's going to escalate the use of the time leap machine, I feel. And you may be thinking, well, Romania, that seems like it would be a good thing because then he could prevent Mayuri from dying and all of this stuff. But this whole series has been slowly but surely hinting at the very possibility that if Okarine keeps on going down the route he's going on, then he may at some point lose Mayuri. What if it's a paradox? What if he's going to lose Mayuri no matter what? What if this whole thing and pursuing being this mad scientist and pursuing Steins Gate is leading to a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, where he's damned if he doesn't, because Mayuri's going to get shot by Moika, unless he goes back and prevents Moika from shooting her. How that happens, I don't know. So that's a possibility. That's a possibility. But he could be damned if he do, because Mayuri is like, if you keep going back and changing the past, eventually, you know, she said to Ferris, she's like, he's getting further and further away from me. It may get to the point where he doesn't have her in his life either way. He's thinking that he's saving her, but it ends up pushing her away. It's a problem, to be sure. So I just, it terrifies me, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. It absolutely terrifies me, because I feel like ever since he decided way back in episode 1 to try and pursue bringing Kurisu back, the moment he chose to bring Kurisu back is like doomed Mayuri. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but the only problem is now we need a human subject. Now, Ocarine would be the choice as the human subject, right? Ocarine seems like the most logical choice for the human subject, because it was his idea. He's kind of the mad scientist. Wouldn't you want to do that? If we're going back to the villains tridecagon, can we revisit this? I feel like we need to revisit the villains tridecagon. So the villains tridecagon is that we had find an apprentice and manipulate them into doing your will. That was step 4. Okay, we were actually, let's revisit the villains tridecagon. I don't have enough room. White Porcoon! One day Conspiracy Board Sama will come in, I'm sure, but we're not ready to drag him out. He's flimsy and tumultuous. So in the villains tridecagon, we had different steps. The first 3 we talked about in a previous video was getting contact from a future self by an unknown force. Check. Gain time travel or time travel related abilities. I would tie that to the tech. I'm going to call that a check. And then we were at step 3, learning of the great forces at play. So we were starting to realize about the black hole, about the time leap, all of that. So check. In step 4 of the villains tridecagon is find an apprentice to manipulate them into doing your will. Check. Kurisu. He has wooed Kurisu as his assistant. They banter and have foreplay back and forth and flirt. Yep. I'm going to check that. So then step 5. Get deep into the dark side of your research or obsessions. I'm going to say we're at step 5. We're at step 5 of the villains tridecagon, because the deep and dark side of his research and obsession, it showed itself with CERN showing up to try to take the technology and kill Mayuri. So what is step 6, pray tell? Well, step 6, I'm not going to spoil the other steps. There are 13 altogether. But step 6 is become a self-experiment in the research or obsessions. That's where I think we're headed next. He's going to go back after and be like, I'm going to stop Mayuri from dying. And to do that, I'm going to be an experiment with the time leap machine. So we're halfway, conveniently, we're halfway through the series, and we're halfway through the villains tridecagon. Fun times! Great times. Love to bring up the villains tridecagon. But yeah, so they can't decide what to do. And Kurisu asks, like, you know, we don't know about the CERN connected line. Daru was way too nonchalant about all of this. Can I just say that? Daru was way too nonchalant. Like, him being like, oh, well, there's nothing to indicate the hacking's been discovered. And I don't know. I'm like, they're a government agency. You made a big deal about hacking into them. Them hacking into you all should be a pretty damn deal. What if it turns out that Daru's been working with Moika the entire time and she wooed him with her feminine wiles? I mean, the cat suit was pretty badass. I'm not going to lie. She looked amazing in this episode, but also she shot Mayuri, so she loses all good points. So, but yeah, they're like, the hacking hasn't been discovered. If they noticed something, they would have done something already. I'm like, again, this is the logic of 18-year-olds. They're like, oh, they would have done something. And I'm like, yeah, they have to get time to like group together and do a stakeout. You just, what? Like, Amane is surprisingly on the up and up with all this. And he's like, can we really overcome time? And poor Mayuri, she suggests they go back to the bananas. God. And Kurisu kind of like makes her feel like, no, Mayuri, we can't use the bananas. But honestly, Mayuri was going back to like the very beginning when it was just doing a microwave on a banana. And it was so simple. I recently watched an episode of Natsume's Book of Friends, which is an amazing series. You should watch it in your own time. It's a nice little comfort show. But there was a phrase in the latest episode I watched, and it was something so small can lead to such a mess. And that applies so well to here, because it's like the tiniest little thing, like just microwave bananas, has become this insane, dangerous, people are dying situation. And I think Ocarine is realizing, he's like, we're not going to do the experiment. We'll give the time leap machine to an appropriate organization. And Daru's like, I agree, which makes me suspicious of Daru now. And Kurisu's like, okay. And Mayuri's like, yes, let's do that. So again, foreshadowing counter. Them saying, oh, we're going to give it over to the organization. We're at the halfway point. What could happen? Foreshadowing. I like that she had all this meat and apples, and she's like, Daru ordered pizza. And he's like, yeah. She's like, I'll just make a salad. And she's like, we'll need. And he's like, wait a second. He's like, you said salad. And she's like, yes, grapefruit salad. And he's like, why do we need natto and beef? Natto is disgusting. I have not had it, but it looks disgusting. Every anime I've seen where people eat it, I feel like you either enjoy it or it's just the grossest thing ever. I don't think I would like it, but I could be surprised. She's like, yeah, we'll just experiment. And he's like, no, salad is not something to experiment with. And she's like, well, why? You'll see once you try. And he's like, if you want a salad, there's a complete salad right here that's already been pre-made. And she gets on to him for not, experimenting. And like, aren't you supposed to be a scientist? But Ocarina is playing it safe right now because he has been literally terrified by the texts and stuff that are being sent to him. And she's like, I expected you to say that we were starting the experiment. And then he's like, well, are you disappointed? And she's like, somewhat, as she's reaching for, are you dissatisfied? And she's like, I guess so, as she reaches up to get the Dr. Pepper. I feel like I feel like Kurisu is kind of like Ocarina's shoulder devil. She is. She's kind of like a shoulder devil to Ocarina. And Mayuri was the shoulder angel. Mayuri was the literal anchor keeping Ocarina from doing something crazy, like legitimately mad scientist crazy. And Kurisu is like, well, come on, it's an experiment. Aren't you a scientist? Where's your intellectual curiosity? We're just chugging Dr. Peppers over here. And Mayuri's like, but that could like make the people around you sad. And now that Mayuri's been killed, it's like you literally shot the shoulder angel and you've left him with the shoulder devil, who he kind of is attracted to. Does not bode well. Does not bode well, right? And so as they're walking, I like that they have the tree. Also, again, you talk about symbolism. They're standing there. There's a literal tree separating the two of them while they're drinking their Dr. Pepper. To me, tree symbolizes life. Like trees symbolize eternal life. They symbolize cycles. They symbolize creationism. So you literally have this tree in between the two of them. You have Ocarina questioning what he should do, and you have Kurisu on the other side being like, well, you should do this. And why not do this? And so it's just the symbolism, y'all. The symbolism. But he's like, I think everyone else agrees. And she's like, can I call Ruka and Feyris? It's a developmental conference. But Amane ended up coming. He didn't say not Amane. And they both decide she may have seen more than the two of us. Red flag, foreshadowing trope. The moment they were like, wow, Mayuri really was the best of us. I was like, ha! The moment they're like, wow, Mayuri really understands the moral efficacy of all this. You'd be ashamed if something happened to her. Yeah. So they're both reminiscing about Mayuri's part in all of this. Like the woman ain't even near the ground yet. And as they walk into the light from the darkness, again, the way that the series does light to dark symbolism is great. She's like, I want to contact my mom about it. And my dad will also find out that I made a time leap machine. Maybe we won't be able to go to Aomori. And Ocarina's like, no, we're going to go. He's like, I don't let my lab members down. I'll solve my lab members' problems. you can't solve everybody's problems, Ocarine. And that really gets her to like feel cared for. And she's like, oh, well, sure. She's like, right. You just want to abuse me as your assistant, right? And he says, because you're my dear companion. I mean, Ocarine right now has kind of dropped the mad scientist pretense. Like, he's dropped that wall where he's not trying to be like, wahaha, I'm Kyoman, Hyoma, and like all that, Hyo and Kyoma. And he's just being himself. He's just being Okabe. He's like, no. He's like, you're my friend, and I care about you. And so I want to help you. There's no ulterior motive. And that, you know, makes her flush. And then he starts to blush. And I love when he checks her for... When he moved towards her, I thought for a hot second he was going to, like, hug her. And then I was like, is he going to kiss her? Is he going to hug her? What is happening? Because Ocarine is not, like, does not recognize romantic cues. And, of course, he thinks that she's, like, got a fever. But he's blushing just as much, you know? You're saying very unassistant-like things. And she's like, well, I'm not. She's like, I'm not grateful to you. I'm just being polite. What kind of tsundere is that? And she's like, I'm not a tsundere. And what about you? You're always saying the craziest stuff. And now you're talking about companions. You're all over the place. And he's like, I never waver. My lab members are my allies and the world is my enemy. That's all. You know, this isn't a foreshadowing counter, but if you're talking about the villain tridecagon, that's a wee-oo kind of moment. I know that Ocarine has joked about being, you know, an enemy of the world. I feel like Patrick from SpongeBob SquarePants, where he's like, wee-oo. Because it's, you know, it's one thing for Ocarine to joke around and be like, oh, we're against the organization. We're against the world. We're an I'm an evil mad scientist. He's not called himself evil before, but he said, I'm a mad scientist against the world. And you joke about that and you think, oh, he's just joking around. It's whatever. But then, if you've watched other series like I have on this channel, look, y'all know where I'm going. If you know the series I'm talking about, you know where I'm going. But there's a series that I've watched on this channel that was fairly well received, series that involves a protagonist who, you know, is like, F the world, gonna just save my friends. And that escalated very quickly from, haha, that's noble, to, oh shit, real quick. So, I never thought I would be comparing Ocarine to that character, but that line there, he's like, I don't care about the world, I care about my friends. I was like, it's like, oh no, red flags. And especially now that my Yuri's dead, I'm like, oh no, lots of red flags, throwing up all over the place. Anyway, he's like, that's all. And she's like, I'm so stunned, I can't speak. And he's like, well, you just spoke. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, next foreshadowing marker, the damn plane. Oh, also questions. What about the satellite? Is that ever going to come back up again? Did that have any reason? Was that, what was the purpose of that? We got to tie back to that at some point. Beryl / John Teeter. We got to tie back to them. Did they have a point in this? I'm glad Ruka and Ferris weren't involved in this because I feel like they could have been in a lot of trouble. So I'm glad they avoided that. Good for them. Hopefully they're not going to be targeted in all of this because they're just civilians. So they get back and Daru's already like got into the pizza, right? Oh my God. Yeah, so he's like snacking while everybody's out. He's like, oh, that's bad manners. I don't know. I don't know. Daru, I don't want to distrust Daru. He's like, why are all three of them the same? And he's like, it's my personal taste. I find that interesting because, okay, you have 3 pizzas on the counter, which, for the record, I love a meat pizza, but I hate olives and peppers on pizzas. I don't like olives at all. I'm like, bleh. But I could have peppers on, like, something that's not pizza. But usually if it's on pizza, I, like, pick them off. That and onions, I'm like, pick them off. But anyway, the one pizza has the slice taken from it, so I don't know if it's, like, 3 different versions of the situation, and one has Mayuri taken from the equation, so now we have 2 more chances. I don't know if it's foreshadowing that. I don't know if that's foreshadowing or not. I'm not gonna put it down as that. He's like, why are you so dictatorial? And she's like, I was right to buy the ingredients, wasn't I? I'll get started. And he's like, wait a second, is she making apple pie? Why didn't you stop her? And he's like, I did with all my might, with all I had. Said, you said you'd protect your other lab members, right? He's like, don't give up. It might not be over yet. Daru looks so concerned about the salad. It's possible the apple pie was just a failed attempt. And normally, and she's like, I forgot radishes, but sweet pickles will work. And Daru's like, it's over. He's like, when this meal's over, I'm going to retire and get married. He's like, I'm going to leave so I don't have to, like, endure these meals. Foreshadowing. Yep. Foreshadowing right there when he's like, after this is over. Anytime somebody's like, once this is over, once we get through this, I'm like, foreshadowing, foreshadowing, foreshadowing. So by this point, I was very concerned watching this and was like, And then Mayuri shows up with Amane, and Amane is immediately like, you could tell Amane was like, I thought I told you to get Kurisu out of the equation. I thought I told you this. And she blames Kurisu for being a spy. And she's like, I don't have any proof. It's a prophecy. So how Amane has gotten this prophecy, I don't know if her dad is related to John Teeter and they've been looking into the future, or if in the future, where she's been looking at the time forums, if Kurisu is working with CERN in the future and that's a known thing. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but we find out from Amane that it's a prophecy she believes in. Who you really are. And she's like, well, that makes so little sense. And so then again, Ocarine tries to insert himself into the situation, only makes it worse, does not help at all, makes it even worse than it was before. And Daru's like, you're digging your own grave. And then Mayuri is like, I don't like fighting. And that stops everything. Again, and that may not seem like foreshadowing, but in that moment I was thinking, every time Ocarine tries to insert himself into the situation, because he doesn't exactly know human psychology the best, but he thinks that he does, he ends up making these mistakes and then doesn't know how to cover. But Mayuri is just a pure, innocent angel who just wants people to get along. And that's what breaks up the fight, is because she's sincere and authentic. Ocarine, the sad part is, I think that Ocarine exaggerated so much and he puts on such a front that when he is being sincere, when he is being authentic, in actuality, it comes across as fake, because they're so used to the goofy mad scientist that when he's being himself, it doesn't seem real, which is what I worry about is going to get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Okay, and then when Mayuri was like, when we're all together, it'd be more fun if we were friends. Well, are you going to go back in the past and convince Moeka to be friends instead of a Destiny's Child member? How's that going to work? How's that going to work? So, anyway, they end up playing the game about the lynx versus viruses. And for the piece of cake that's left, the strawberry piece of cake, and it ends up being, I did like the scene of Kurisu helping Suzu to beat him, and she's like, I don't want to thank you, but cool. He's like, in World of Games, it's live or die. Foreshadowing! In the World of Games, it's live or die. Wasn't Kurisu the one that said several episodes ago that Ocarine was very bad at playing these games? Yes, think so. But anyway, so she's like, knowing Okabe's personality, I'm sure of it. And then she ends up reading, she's like, I won't thank you. But then Mayuri is like, I'm glad that you were trying to be nice to her and be a friend. Mayushi is happy that you made friends with Suzu. And she's like, oh, well, she's like, we're not really friends. But I think you're right. When we're all together, it's more fun to get along. And I was talking with Okabe, and you may be the one with the clearest view of the lab. And she's like, oh, that was the only time Okabe has looked serious. It was kind of creepy. And she's like, well, that's mean to Ocarine. She's like, sorry. Okay. Again, another foreshadowing moment. Like, again, framing that Mayuri is the heart of the lab. Framing that she's the one that keeps everybody together. If anything happens to you, Mayuri, we're kind of all screwed. So then, he's like, I'm off to plan for round 2. And it's like, the last dessert of your life. Oh my God. Yep. Yep. Foreshadowing it. We've already had 15 foreshadowing moments in this episode, and we're not done. Yep. The last dessert of your life. And she's like, do you want to go check on him? I'll take care of this. And she's like, okay, sure. At this point, the hourglass had stopped. Okay. So by that point, when she went to check, the hourglass sand had stopped. Why did it stop? I don't understand what happened there. Why? Let me see. What makes hourglass stop working? Says it's interrupted by clogging, which can be caused by moisture in the air, sand, or inconsistent particle shape, or particles jamming together under pressure. I mean, I don't want to look into spoilers, obviously, but if you're talking about moisture in the sand and inconsistent particle pressure, it could be the tears. The tears from Mayuri's death to come clogged the hourglass, and thus the sands wouldn't work. So we go back to this damn rooftop with this damn full moon. Is that foreshadowing? I think so, because it signifies something's about to go down. Full moons make all folks crazy. And he's up on the rooftop looking somber, right? And then, okay, her showing up with this lightsaber! The red lightsaber! That's foreshadowing. I was like, okay, Darth Mayuri. Darth Mayushi. I was like, why is she showing up with this red lightsaber? Looking like she's going to be chopped in half. Also, red the color of blood. I'm just like, and she's like, it's future gadget number 6. Wait, okay, future gadget number 6. Number 1 is Ocarine. 2 is Daru. 3 is Mayuri. 4 is Kurisu. 5, 6 is Ruka. Never mind. I was like, if it was, 006, but no. Don't use it as a flashlight. She's like, but it's bright. So she sets it up against the railing there. And they're sitting there talking and looking at the moon, being like, oh, you're having fun. She's like, I am. The pizza was good. And Suzu and Kurisu are having fun. And he's like, I'm not. And then she just sits there smiling, and the two of them have this moment. And then she said, we've got lots of lab members, but I was thinking that lately we've been lacking a bunch of stuff. And she's like, yeah, chairs. She's like, we need more utensils. And he's like, well, wait just a bit more. And then once we announce, that was foreshadowing. Once we announce the time machine, we'll have all the resources we need for all the new friends that we've made. And I was like, I don't like that at all. We'll get some kind of reward, and that'll solve everything. We're just going to make the whole conversation foreshadowing, because there's so many moments in just this one conversation. Like, she's like, oh, really? We can buy chair and utensils. He's like, yeah. What if we could buy those and still have money left over? And she's like, we could get a microwave like I wanted from the very beginning, And then this part here, where she tells Ocarine that she's like, it's kind of strange, but you looked really lonely in the spring. And the lab was always quiet, but then we had Daru and the others. And all these others she starts to mention. And it goes back to that dream that he had, where she was talking about it was just the two of them till the end of time, right? Or till the beginning of time. And so there's this concept that, the more that Ocarine gets involved with these other people, the further he is from Mayuri. Which, that's not to be disposed saying that, Ocarine can't have friends, but it's just the more he's gotten involved with these other people, it's taken him away from his roots. Like, the whole point of him and Mayuri being together. Like, it feels like he's forgotten what the point of them being together was, the more he's devoted himself to this experiment. And Ocarine seems to get more and more worried about that. And he asks her about it, and she's like, well, it's okay now. even if Mayushi isn't your hostage anymore. And I'm like, that's the biggest foreshadowing of all. She's like, before you were lonely, you didn't have any friends. It was just the two of us. And she basically kind of says, like, you needed me. I kept you from being alone. But now look at all the friends you have. So, if something were to happen to me, you'd be all right. And I was like, oh no, this is bad foreshadowing. And then Daru says there's trouble, which we're at 20 foreshadowing moments now. But a bomb threatened Akihabara. The following lines have been shut down due to the bomb threat. Basically the bomb threat has it to where you can't leave town. They can't escape. And they're like, a bomb threat? What a pain. She's like, I need to call home. The party was to celebrate the time machine's completion, right? He's like, that's right. Why mention that now? Are you still hacking into CERN? He's like, I got in deeper. I'm like, why is Daru in deeper? I've got a direct connection to CERN. She's like, what? And then she looks and sees the machine. And she's like, oh no. Amane's like, oh bitch, no. We gotta go because they're coming for the machine. That's why they put this bomb threat in to shut down transportation, to use it as a distraction while they come and do this. Yeah. She's like, no, why would you... Again, Daru doing this. I'm like, I thought Daru was smarter than this. So I'm really like, but what? Bunch of Icaruses. And Amane's like, oh, hell to the no. And she's like, everyone, you need to... But then she stops and says, I'm sorry, I'm leaving. So my thing is, Amane, that's going to be a thing. Because Okarine's going to be like, you were going to tell us to go, and then you didn't. Why didn't you? So that's a question. Why did Amane let them get caught? Why did she let them get caught? She knew CERN was coming, so why didn't she say anything? What's going on? And Kurisu's like, what was all that about? And it's through the hourglass. And they're like, what will you do? Are you going to take a taxi home? And he's like, you don't have the money for a taxi. And then he looks up at the hourglass and sees that it's not working. The time has stopped. It's like the singularity point. This is it. Last episode, he's like, all roads lead to this point. Everything's leading to this moment where Mayuri's going to die. This is the singularity point. This is the event horizon. This is it. This is the moment that's going to change everything. Yep. And then she's like, oh, and Mayuri then says that her watch stopped as they're coming up the stairs. Oh my God. So then these people show up in masks. They're all guys with guns, which is terrifying. And then of course Daru's like, and he's like, but why? And then the hourglass fell. They broke the TV. What did it say there? Something about it being suspended. Yeah, because Ocarine says, what is this? And it's like, they have been suspended and that's it. And they break the TV. And they say not to move, but where did these guys come from? Where'd they get the masks? And of course, Ocarine is terrified, as one would be. And then from the shadows, wearing like the most Selena Kyle Catwoman getup, is literally Moika, who shows up like the fudge. With her gun. She looks like Julia off of Cowboy Bebop. She's giving Cowboy Bebop Julia vibes, I'm just saying. And then Mayuri's like, Moika, and she says, yeah, Kiryu Moika. Girl, she even has the dead anime mom hairdo. And she says CERN is going to take the time machine. And she holds the gun up and says, Kurisu, Okabe, and Hashida, you three are coming with me. Uh-huh. Now, I don't know why Daru's hand goes down a little bit. I don't know what that's leading to. And they're like, what about Mayuri? I'm like, just let Mayuri go. Just don't hurt her. Just knock her out. But the moment she said not needed, I was like, oh, hell no. The animation on Ocarina's face where he's like, don't do it. I'm like, My thing is, he did not leap. If he had leapt in front of her, if he had leapt in front of Mayuri, granted, there were 4 other guys in that room with a gun. But if they need him to finish the time machine, would they have shot? I don't know. That's a big if. That's a big if. Oh my God. I actually really, and she says it's for FB. It's for FB. It's for FB. What the fudge is FB? What is that? Questions. What is FB? We're going to tie into that. Yep. What is FB? Yeah. 4B, FB, FB. What is FB? I don't know. But it's like her motivation that keeps her doing it. So why? Oh, that moment there where she shot and they like cut over and you saw like Ocarine and there was like the blood splatter on the clock and on the damn Oopa and the watch breaks along with the hourglass. Nope. Not good. Not good. Yeah, this is really bad. This is really bad. Oh my gosh. And then seeing her and all that. And he says, what the hell is this? This does not bode well, Cotton. And it's August 13th. This does not bode well. I've talked for over an hour about this episode. I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to save Mayuri. And I don't know if... My fear in all of this is that even if they save her, it won't be the same relationship that... I feel like there is something that, like... I don't know if Ocarine would save Mayuri, and by saving Mayuri, and by that I mean, like, making sure that she doesn't die and ensuring that she has a happy life, you know... The problem is, I feel like he would do one of those situations where he's like, I'll go back and change the past so that you don't end up dying and you can live a happy life. But what I fear is that happy life he wants for her will come at the cost of him and her never being able to be together. And like she told Ocarine, she's like, that would be really sad and I would cry and I would hate that. So it's like, do you take matters into your own hands to make sure somebody that you care about lives, but then it means that you can't be with them. And how does that affect that person? And is that fair? Oh my God. So yeah, I want to watch episode 13 so bad, but I'm going to wait a little bit. A wee bit, until I've looked at the comments for episodes 10 and 11. I'm going to be very mindful and demure. And keep my cool. That'll be easy. But I'm terrified. I'm like, okay, Moeka is with CERN, but it seems like she's not with CERN because she wants to be. It seems like she's being forced to be with them. So what's that about? What about Amane? If Amane knows about this prophecy, has Amane met Moeka? Have they been in the same place twice? Have they ever been in the same place? I don't think they have. I don't think that Amane and Moeka have ever been in the same scene together. That should have been foreshadowing. We already had 20 moments in this episode alone, but I don't think, no, because Amane has always been, maybe she was inside the TV store when Moeka has shown up, but I don't think Moeka has been there because the video that was taken of their party, usually Moika's the one that does that, but Amani said the Ocarine had did that. So yeah, no, they never were in the same place. Yep, I've got a lot of questions. And I'm terrified, and we're halfway through. Anyway, I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Steins Gate.